Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bad Dependencies. You're joined by myself, as usual, Mackenzie, and also researcher extraordinaire Charlie Erickson, as usual. Charlie, how you doing this week?
I am much better. No longer got the human malware. I can actually think straight. It's great.
I'm glad to hear that. Took you for a loop for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was rough.
You were dying. Well, we're good to have you back at 100%. And yeah, you've been busy because we've got lots to kind of talk about here. So if any of those that kind of follow me on LinkedIn or anything will probably notice that on Saturday morning I went live on a ramble about some malware that was happening. But in the non-rambling version, Charlie, do you want to tell us kind of what you discovered at the start of last week and and the weekend, I guess, and what all unfolded?
Yeah. So it was a Saturday, June 7th.
Always a Saturday. You're
What's
always ruining my
I
Saturdays.
know. It's such an inconvenient thing working with me. Yeah, so I was sitting poking at our triage queue, seeing what was going on. I noticed a package that I kind of recognized the name of, and I saw it had a lot of downloads. I was like, wait, there's something kind of suspicious here, right? Our system had detected obfuscation that wasn't really expected. Quickly realized, hey, this packet has been compromised. This packet had like 100,000 downloads. So I was like, oh,
I remember the first message because here's a spoiler coming up for everyone listening. This is going to get a whole lot worse.
yes.
But I remember the first package you said you could, hey, this is pretty big. Here's a package of 100,000 weekly downloads. I'm going to go, oh shit, that's oh crap,
Yeah.
that's happened. But then okay, but you found
Yeah.
that. What
So
happened
as soon
next?
as I kind of messaged you and some other people, I was like, oh, there's another package just down the list from that same scope, right? The react-native-aria. Yeah, that one's compromised too. So, and then there was another one. So I was like, shit, it's 3 packages. It was like 300,000 downloads, something like that. Obviously we also went and started to figure out like who of our customers should we notify and things like that. And then I was like, okay, let's just make sure that we got everything, right? Because clearly if there's not just one, but 3, maybe there's more. At that point, I think there was like 9 packages. So I was starting to write all that up, right? Try to compile a full list. I refreshed the page and it was like the NPM page for that offer. And it was like one of the packages had like new version like 3 minutes ago. I was like, ooh, these guys still be active. So I went and checked. Right, the latest package, yes, it was one that was back. So for like a good 45 minutes where I was sitting there like refreshing, what's the next one to drop? What's the next one to drop? Just basically trying to keep up.
So what kind of happened was we found one piece of malware, 100,000 downloads, significant just in and itself. And then after that, you found another one with the exact same
Yep.
payload, right? The exact same malware. Then another one, then another one, then another one. Now, these were all kind of related. How were they related
So they all,
together? Like what?
yeah, they all belonged to a scope called the react-native-aria, which is a set of libraries, I believe, primarily maintained by this company called GlueStack that are very popular within the React Native ecosystem. There was also a package from GlueStack themselves that was compromised. I believe it was their utils package. The way they all connected also was that there was a maintainer that had access to them all, which is a ex-GlueStack employee, but still current maintainer. Yeah.
Oh, so that was the connect. Okay, so ex-GlueStat, but still active in the
Yeah.
project. Because I originally thought that it was someone that that had left. Because yeah, there's a couple. Because just to kind of put it in here, like how was the access made? Like, was it their GitHub that was compromised? Was it something else? Like, how was the access actually made to these packages?
Yeah, so I don't think we know that for sure yet, but my belief would be that it was the NPM token somehow that was compromised.
I mean, that makes sense because the GitHub versions didn't match
Yeah.
up. So that kind of makes sense. I thought then, because this, like, just you saying that they're still a maintainer, I would have thought, because then you wonder, okay, how did the attackers get this NPM token? And there's lots of ways, and we can't. Well, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm assuming that you don't really know, like, how they got access to it. But when you're talking about like an ex-employee, then it's kind of like, okay, this could be malicious intent from an ex-employee too. Like it's a pretty left field way to do because they could just be phished. They could have anything, but that's where my brain immediately went. So it's interesting that it doesn't appear that that's actually the
Yeah.
case. of what happened here.
I mean, some of the most obvious ones could be that they compromised this GitHub to begin with, and then there was a private repo with a token in it. It could have been phishing. I think I saw some reporting from the Ripple incident that had started as phishing.
Okay,
But also what could have happened is there was a leaked token somewhere in a public GitHub repo that somebody caught really quickly. It's also possible that this person had been compromised as a part of another supply chain attack, right? Think back to the other attack that this threat actor did, which was the RAND user agent compromise, right? They do drop a backdoor.
Yeah.
And as they start to pop individual users, right, they're targeting developers. So actually you start to have like a web of people that could be infected.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk about that too, because we had, like, what was really interesting is immediately you knew that this was the same threat actor that we had seen before. So, I mean, for those that don't know, Charlie, researcher extraordinaire, he has a sixth sense when it comes. He looks at malware all day, every day. Well, not all day, every day, but a lot. So you recognize patterns and things. So you kind of immediately knew that this is the threat actor that we had seen before. So where had we previously seen this threat actor?
Yeah, so we saw it with the RAND user agent packets that got compromised back in May sometime. And yeah, it was very noticeable because it was the same kind of obfuscation and everything they used. So yeah. You see the patterns.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny the way that they do it is that I remember the first time we reported on using white spaces to push it off the screen. It seems so ridiculous. But actually, like, this is like a very common. So if, like, the malware was in the NPM package and then the threat actor had used a bunch of white spaces to push it off screen. Just so that, like, it didn't look normal, but it was still there. It's a hilariously stupid way of obfuscating. But it clearly worked.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw it, it almost fooled me. Like, I was like, wait, there's nothing here. Yeah. The good thing is that it creates a signal. That's quite noticeable.
Right, yes. Yeah, definitely. And the malware itself, so you've got kind of like the malware that's in there, but the end payload, once you had obfuscated, that was almost identical as well to RAND user. What was that doing? Like, what was actually happening? Like, let's say, like, these packages all got compromised. Let's say you didn't find it, because ultimately you found it within a few hours, you alerted everyone, we got the situation under control, and ultimately not many people were infected by this. But what would have happened had we not stopped it? What was the malware actually doing?
Yeah, so it was dropping what we call a RAT, a remote access Trojan, which is also a backdoor. It drops this file which kind of get executed, and then it communicates up with their command and control server, and it gives them like a remote shell on your machine. It was basically the same payload as last time. There were some small updates. It had added in a couple of commands they could kind of execute to get information about the system and a few things. But it's basically a reverse shell is what it is. So they can drop new files, steal things, you name it.
It's the worst case scenario, really. Yes. Like, if you had this on your system, because, like, yeah, they can do a few things, but they can also just upload more malware. Yes. Like, they're connected into your system. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. Scary stuff. But luckily, we did manage to stop it. And looking in there, none of these kind of got downloaded too many times in between from what I was kind of looking at. So look, I'm going to call it a win. I'm going to call it a win right there for finding that. I mean, yeah. In total, how many, what was the total number of weekly downloads?
A week or so.
Right? Yeah.
But of course, account for the fact that some of them depend on each other, right? So you can get the same download kind of by multiple steps, etc.
Right.
But still, very popular.
But I mean, even if it had gone on a week, then you could expect 10, 20,000 applications infected.
Yes.
Like something for sure. What else are we missing?
I'm going to touch on really quickly, also speaking to the how did they infect or how did they get this token? So following up from that, I actually went back and looked at what are all the packages that we've seen from this threat actor, and I found a bunch. You can see that on the blog. But also I decided to look to see, can we find anything that has some of the same signatures? And actually, I found a bunch of GitHub repos that had been compromised. So actually, the code is live in those GitHub repos. Some of that code has trickled into NPM packages as well.
Right. Okay.
We actually had one guy reach out to us through a live chat on the Aikido website over the weekend going like, hey, why is my package flagged as malware? And we were able to confirm, like, yeah, it was one of those. And then I looked at it and was like, oh yeah, his GitHub repos were also compromised, even though when I searched for some of those code snippets, he didn't show up in a search list. So I think, was there like 9 repos or something like that I found just through search? 19 repos. So I found 19 repos that have been compromised from December 2024 earliest up until now. But clearly that number is underestimated because these repos from this guy did not show up in the search, even though it should have. So the potential scope of this is actually a lot larger than what we can see from publicly available data.
But this guy's crazy prolific then. What are you thinking in terms of the threat actor? We have some ideas, right? I don't know. Like, I'm not going to disclose anything that we're not certain of, but are you thinking individual? Are you thinking state-sponsored? Like, what? Like, who is this actor that we can think of?
This smells state-sponsored, yeah.
It's just so widespread because so many packages have been compromised, and GitHub projects and everything. Like, there's a few ways to compromise these. One way, I'm not saying this is what happened, but one way is to buy access, like on this black markets where you buy NPM tokens, you buy like, so someone potentially could have invested a lot of money into getting access to these things.
And what's really interesting to notice in this case also is because, like, now we have a case where we know that the user was compromised, like the GitHub account was compromised. Clearly, they have probably installed, they've pulled the code down and run it while they're developing locally. So I would assume their machine is compromised, right? So now you have an infection node. What else could they got access to?
Yeah.
And then spreading from there on, all of the people that use their packages, right? You start to see how this from a few viral nodes can potentially spread quite quickly and have these like ripple effects.
So we're going to see more, is essentially what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah.
Potentially, right?
I would expect so.
All right. Well, we'll be there to try and find them. So sure. But let's move on because we have some other things to talk about as well today. We actually have a follow-up on last week's episode because something funny happened. We published our first episode and both of us got contacted by a guy who was like, hey, you should probably know that you were talking about me on your episode. Yes. So Charlie, what happened? What happened there?
Yeah, so we got contacted. I don't know if we should say his name or where he were, but he works at a company that does similar.
I'm trying to get him on the show. And he's happy to get that looked at by his work because we kind of compete in a little way, and obviously not on the show. But let's leave his name out of it, and then hopefully we can bring him on the show and have a yarn to him.
Yeah, so it turns out that the packages we looked at last time were his packages that he had used as the basis for a presentation at a conference he was going to do, which is really cool. Now, what became interesting was that last week I saw a packet. I was like, oh, he's up to something again, right? So I messaged him going like, hey, I saw like a thing that had your fingerprints on it. Like, are you finding anything new, cool, and interesting? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, wait, but I saw this packet. It was an exact copy of what you did, right? It had the s-test.jpg, all of your LLM generated code. It looked like, is this not you? And he's like, no. So we got a copycat.
Which is really funny because I have a conspiracy now, is that you mentioned that he presented this at a conference. So did someone that was in the audience get an idea?
Oh, I was wondering. I was thinking maybe we were responsible for bringing attention to this and that generating, which would mean worse. The good thing is we detect this really easily now because we already know what it looks like. So you will get caught pretty much straight away if you just do that.
I think for a recap, what was really interesting about this is that this researcher was using LLMs to try and create, let's just call it noise. So just lots of code, so that it's really hard to kind of detect it because you have just huge amounts. So it was a really interesting use case of LLMs using that. And then obviously either by us or maybe from his presentations or something, someone else has got the idea for this. Yeah. So, that is always a give and take. But I want to express there's no reason not to talk about this publicly because it's always good to get these ideas out there in the public so that we can fight them.
Yeah, and obviously, right, we detect these things really easily because we continue to improve our rule sets and all these kind of things. So frankly, you need to be a lot more creative than this. So not too concerned.
Nice try. Well, the first time it was very interesting.
Yes.
I quite enjoyed it. So.
It was nice.
So yeah, but really interesting. We're gonna hopefully we'll see if we can get him on the show and have a chat to us about some of the cool stuff that they've been
Yeah,
doing.
that'd be great.
All right, Charlie. What else have we been seeing out there in the wild? We had a pretty busy week. You've detected a huge amount of just general packages as well. Is there anything else before we kind of close up on this episode that we've seen out there in the wild that we can let the people know?
No, other than that, it's just been a average run-of-the-mill kind of week or two. Nothing crazy. A lot of silly stuff.
And I just want to remind the audience here, if you do want to see what we're flagging as malware, what we're all finding out there, you can go to intel.aikido.dev, and there you'll see our threat feed of all of the malicious packages. Well, that's kind of what we have for you this week. We're going to be coming back in 2 weeks. We're going to have more stories because we always do.
Yes.
We're going to have a look, but it's been a pretty wild ride for the last couple of weeks, especially with that big attack. And I also encourage you, I'm going to have links to all of Charlie's latest blogs, latest and greatest in the show notes. Until next time, Charlie, thank you for joining with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bad Actors podcast. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. So until then.
Ciao.